What if the Washington Quarter you've been spending since childhood is actually worth more than a luxury car? Hidden among everyday 25-cent coins are three rare Washington Quarters that collectors are desperate to find because of silver content, rare dates, and unbelievable minting errors. One small detail most people never notice can turn an ordinary quarter into a 5- or 6-figure treasure. Millions of these coins were spent before anyone realized their true value. Before you toss another quarter into your pocket or vending machine, stop and look closely, because you might already own one of the most valuable Washington quarter-dollar coins. Imagine holding a small piece of metal that has silently witnessed the turning of an era, a coin that seems ordinary to millions yet carries within it the story of economic pressure, shifting minting technology, national symbolism, and the changing identity of American coinage. And that coin is the 1980 Washington Quarter, a piece that appears so common that most people barely glance at it, yet its story stretches back almost half a century before its creation, beginning with the origins of the Washington Quarter in 1932, when the United States sought to honor the bicentennial of George Washington's birth and chose to replace the standing Liberty Quarter with a new design bearing the profile of the nation's first president. And from that moment, the Washington Quarter began its long journey through decades of American history, reflecting the transformation of the country, its economy, and its technology, with the 1980 quarter marking a significant moment within the broader narrative of American coin production and circulation as the United States moved through the late 1970s and approached the dawn of the 1980s. The mint faced rising metal costs, demand for increased production, and widespread circulation challenges, all of which directly influenced the production of the 1980 Washington Quarter. And to understand this coin fully, you must travel back to the changes forced upon American coinage in 1965, when the government removed silver from quarters and dimes due to the rising price of silver, a decision that created the copper-nickel-clad composition still used in 1980, and that composition formed the base identity of the Washington Quarter for the next several decades, creating the familiar layered appearance we all know, with a copper core and a nickel outer layer. And by the time the 1980 quarter was struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, the nation was grappling with inflation, economic uncertainty, and huge public reliance on coinage for daily transactions, pushing the mint to produce staggering numbers of circulating quarters, with the Philadelphia mint striking hundreds of millions, while the Denver mint also contributed enormous figures, making the 1980 quarter one of the more plentiful issues of the decade. Yet abundance does not diminish significance, because even within a high mintage year, every coin carries its own miniature history shaped by the dies that struck at, the machines that fed the blankets, the conditions of production, the specific punches used for mint marks, and the growing stresses placed on mint equipment. And in 1980, the Philadelphia Mint still produced coins without a P mint mark, because the P mint mark on quarters was not introduced until 1980 for the Susan B. Anthony dollar and 1980 for other denominations, but would not appear on quarters until 1980 became a transitional moment leading into the following year, when the P mint mark would become standard for quarters. Starting in 1980, the coin world stood at the edge of this shift, with collectors paying attention to subtle details of the minting process. And although the 1980 quarter does not contain silver, it stands as a representative of the era when America fully embraced modern clad coinage and depended heavily on these quarters to bear the brunt of economic life, circulating in stores, transportation systems, vending machines, laundromats, toll booths, and nearly every small-scale purchase across the country. And when you examine a 1980 Washington Quarter, you are looking at a piece built from decades of design continuity, since the original portrait of George Washington by John Flanagan remained largely unchanged through this period, based on the classic bust sculpted by Jean-Antoine Howden and chosen through a competitive design process that attempted to capture the dignity and calm authority of Washington's character. And though worn and smooth through circulation, the 1980 rendition of the portrait still carries the same classical aesthetic, that connected generations of Americans to their history through everyday currency, and the reverse of the coin featuring the eagle, with outstretched wings perched upon a bundle of arrows surrounded by olive branches, continues the long-standing theme of American strength and peace, carefully balanced and symbolically linked to the nation's founding principles. And by 1980, this design had already been in use for nearly half a century, making it one of the longest-running reverse designs in U.S. coinage history. And that continuity helps illustrate why coins like the 1980 quarter matter, because they serve as continuity pieces anchoring Americans to a shared national visual language, and these coins carried that language into the pockets of millions during a moment of cultural transition, political tension, technological advancement, and shifting national identity, marking a time when Americans were moving from the post-war era into a new digital age. And as the country changed, so too did the production environment at the Mint, which was modernizing its quality control approaches, die polishing techniques, and blanket preparation processes, enabling more consistent strike quality, though still susceptible to die cracks, weak strikes, and minor errors that today create variety interest among collectors. And when you hold a 1980 quarter, you might encounter subtle differences in luster, strike sharpness, rim quality, and even rotational alignment, all of which reflect the mechanical influences of the minting equipment used during peak production. And although error coins from the 1980 quarter are not as headline-grabbing as some other dates, collectors still pursue off-center strikes, double dies, clipped blankets, partial collars, and die cracks or cuts that offer insight into the minting environment of that year, and each variety extends the story of the 1980 quarter, revealing how even mass-produced objects can carry individual personality shaped by the moment of their creation. And when you step back and consider the broader landscape of numismatics in 1980, you see that the Washington quarter remained a foundational part of American collecting culture, even as the market began to evolve with growing interest in grading services, coin conventions, and a rising emphasis on preserving high-level mint state examples, which today make gem quality 1980 quarters more desirable despite their high overall mintage. Because pristine examples free of bag marks with strong strikes and full detail are surprisingly difficult to find due to the rough handling conditions of bulk storage and distribution used during that period. And in this way, the 1980 Washington quarter bridges the world of everyday commerce and the world of serious collecting, serving both as a common workhorse coin and an item with historical weight, cultural relevance, economic context, and artistic lineage that stretches back to the nation's early years. And throughout the long lifespan of the Washington Quarter series, the 1980 issue stands as a dependable snapshot of America at the turn of a decade, capturing the transition from 1970s inflation and economic struggle into the rising technological and political shifts of the 1980s, when the nation moved toward new ideas, new industries, and new identities, but still clung to the traditional imagery of Washington, the eagle, the arrows, and the olive branches on its circulating coinage. And as the Mint looked forward to future redesigns, changes, and commemorations, the 1980 quarter served as a reminder that even in times of national change, Americans rely on familiar symbols to guide their sense of continuity and stability. And in the decades since these coins first left the presses, they have traveled through millions of hands, every scratch telling a story, every worn detail representing years of use, and every still shining example revealing the craftsmanship of the Mint at the time. And today, collectors, historians, and hobbyists study the 1980 quarter not simply as a piece of currency, but as a window into the spirit, machinery, and national mood of the era in which it was born. And this is why this seemingly ordinary coin can support a 2-hour exploration, because its story touches economics, design, national identity, technology, minting process, era, culture, mass production, and the long lineage of the Washington Quarter series, making the 1980 issue a powerful chapter within the continuing narrative of American numismatic history. Imagine holding in your hand a simple 25-cent piece minted in 1980, a coin so ordinary that millions of people walked past it every single day without ever realizing the deep layered and powerful history. It carries a story that begins long before the year stamped on its surface, a story rooted in American identity, wartime necessity, the evolution of national symbolism, and the unstoppable force of modern minting technology. The 1980 Washington quarter is more than pocket change. It is a living artifact that bridges the founding ideals of the United States with the fast-changing economic landscape of the late 20th century, and in this video we journey back in time to explore how this one coin reflects decades of transformation, from the original vision of George Washington's image being carefully sculpted for the first 1932 issue to the challenges faced by the mint in keeping up with rising metal prices and nationwide circulation demands. You're about to enter a world where every ridge, every strike, and every tiny detail on the coin tells the story of America itself. Now, as we trace this history, we begin with the origins of the Washington quarter. Born from the bicentennial celebration of George Washington's birth in 1932, a moment when the United States looked to honor its first president with a circulating coin that would symbolize leadership, stability, and the nation's moral foundation. The design created by John Flanagan reflected not only Washington's profile but the classical artistic influences that shaped American coinage from the start, and long before 1980 arrived, the quarter went through major changes such as the removal of silver after 1964, when rising metal prices forced the mint to shift to the copper-nickel-clad composition, a change that transformed both the feel and the sound of the coin in circulation. And as the 1970s progressed, the U.S. Mint faced increasing demand for quarters as vending machines, parking meters, arcade systems, toll booths, and automated services spread nationwide, requiring a constant supply of reliable, precise, and durable coinage. This demand, intensified by inflation and economic shifts, set the stage for the massive production totals of 1980, a year when the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint all worked at full capacity, while America was transitioning through major political and economic shifts. The 1980 Washington quarter became a symbol of everyday life, a piece of currency passing through the hands of workers, travelers, students, families, and businesses, reflecting the pulse of the era. And while many people see only an ordinary quarter, numismatists know that the year 1980 holds unique significance. It marks a time when the mint's technology was expanding, the presses were becoming more refined, strike quality was improving, and coin distribution systems were reaching unprecedented efficiency, all of which shaped the way the 1980 quarter looks, feels, and survives today. And as we dive deeper into the details, we find that the Philadelphia Mint produced quarters without a mint mark, something that had been standard since the early years. And this no mint mark variety became one of the most commonly encountered quarters in circulation. It also represents the backbone of American commerce. The Denver Mint, marked with a bold D, played an equally important role in distributing billions of coins across the western and central United States, while the San Francisco Mint focused on proof strikes, using specially polished dies to create coins with mirror-like finishes intended for collectors rather than circulation. Each of these mints contributed to the landscape of 1980 quarter production, and each adds a unique layer to the story. When we examine the design, we see Washington's classical bust on the obverse, a symbol of American leadership, and on the reverse, the heraldic eagle, spread wings, strong posture, arrows, olive branches, and bold United States of America lettering, echoing the country's resilience and its commitment to strength and peace. And by the time 1980 arrived, this design had already been in circulation for nearly half a century, becoming one of the most recognizable images in all American currency. Now consider what the quarter moved through in the late 70s and early 80s. Inflation was high, wages were shifting, energy crises had reshaped national priorities, and coins were circulating faster The never vending machines for sodas, arcade games, fast food restaurants, coin-operated laundromats, all of these fueled an enormous need for reliable quarters, making the 1980 issue one of the most heavily used and widespread of its era, and this massive usage is why high-grade examples, especially those with strong mint luster, sharp details, and clean fields, are so coveted by collectors today. Because most 1980 quarters lived a hard life in pockets, purses, cash drawers, and machines. Finding a pristine one is far harder than most people realize, and as we travel further into this coin story, we uncover how era varieties struck slightly off-center, weakly struck, or featuring early die breaks have become prized finds in the hobby, each one offering a unique window into how minting operations worked in 1980, a time when the pressure to produce billions of coins could stress dies and machinery. These eras tell their own story of how industrial-scale production shaped the coins we hold, and now we place the 1980 quarter in the timeline of American coinage, bridging the gap between earlier silver issues and the later state quarters program, which would begin in 1999. The 1980 coin stands at a pivotal moment, symbolizing the transition from traditional national themes to the more modern collectible era that brought millions into the hobby. And as we bring this expansive history together, we see that the 1980 Washington quarter is the perfect representation of America's changing economy, evolving industry, growing technology, and enduring national pride. From its origins in the 1930s celebration of Washington's birth to its role in everyday life in 1980. The coin carries a story much larger than its small size, and through this full exploration, you can now understand why holding one is like holding a chapter of American history. And as you dive into this to our deep journey, you realize that every coin has a voice, every date has a purpose, and the 1980 Washington quarter stands as a reminder that even the most common piece of currency can reveal an extraordinary story once you look closely enough. Imagine holding a 1979 Washington quarter in your hand and realizing that this small piece of metal carries the echoes of an entire era of American history. A coin born at the crossroads of shifting economies, advancing minting technologies, and the evolving identity of the United States. The 1979 Washington quarter stands as more than just 25 cents. It is a witness to the transformation of a nation and a continuation of a legacy that began decades earlier when the first Washington quarter was introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The design by John Flanagan remained the face of the quarter for generations, and by the time 1979 arrived, the coin had already journeyed through war, prosperity, recession, and the complete overhaul of U.S. coinage metal composition. Yet the story of the 1979 quarter is not simply a continuation, but a defining chapter that reflects the changing priorities of the mint and the shifting mindset of the American public as the nation moved through the late 1970s, a time marked by rising inflation, energy crises, and a reevaluation of economic stability. The quarter played a vital role in everyday commerce, becoming one of the most handled and most essential coins in circulation. The 1979 issue came during a period when the mint was refining its processes, improving die preparation, and strengthening quality control to meet increasing demand. And as the country navigated rising prices and rapid consumer growth, the quarter became a symbol of both stability and necessity woven into the fabric of daily transactions. Vending machines, toll roads, grocery counters, and millions of hands across the country. While the composition of the coin remained the copper nickel-clad structure introduced in 1965, the 1979 quarter stands out because it reflects the mint's push toward consistency as well as the subtle design variations that collectors continue to examine today. From the sharpness of Flanagan's iconic portrait to the refinement of the eagle on the reverse, each 1979 strike carries its own visual signature shaped by the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, each facility contributing to a nationwide supply that kept America moving during an era of economic tension. The Philadelphia Mint produced massive quantities with no mint mark. The Denver Mint marked its coins with the distinctive D And the San Francisco Mint issued proof coins with the S Mint mark, created with polished dies and mirrored fields that turned an ordinary everyday quarter into a shining display piece as we dive deeper into the story of the 1979 Washington quarter. We explore not only how it was made, but why it matters. We travel into the halls of the U.S. Mint, where engravers fine-tuned every detail of Washington's profile, ensuring that the image of the first president would remain a powerful national symbol. We examine the role of the Mint director, the production challenges of the late 70s, and the technological advancements that allowed 1979 quarters to reach a higher level of consistency than earlier clad issues. We follow the coin from raw metal sheets to blanking presses to striking chambers where thousands of tons of pressure transform simple discs into precision-crafted currency. We explore how errors such as off-center strikes, cleft plankets, grease-filled dies, and broad strikes slipped into circulation, becoming treasures for watchful collectors. Decades later, each flawed coin telling a story of its own, we look into how the 1979 quarter moved through American life, appearing in payphones, arcades, parking meters, card washes, diners, and every corner of a bustling nation, and how the quarter became an essential part of economic survival for millions of Americans during a time when every cent mattered. We dig into collector interest, studying why some 1979 quarters in brilliant, uncirculated, or proof condition command respect and value in the modern market, and we trace how the Washington Quarter series paved the way for the historic redesigns that would eventually shape the future of U.S. coinage, including the state quarters program that began 20 years later. Through journey, the 1979 Washington Quarter becomes not just an object, but a narrative, a portrait of a country in transition, a reflection of craftsmanship, history, economy, and national identity. From the enduring legacy of George Washington to the industrial power of the Mint, from the pockets of everyday Americans to the albums of passionate collectors, the story of the 1979 quarter is rich, dynamic, and deeply connected to the American experience. And as we unfold its history layer by layer, you will discover how this single coin captures the essence of an entire era, reminding us that even the smallest objects can hold the greatest stories.